Hello, my name is Nicolas Merritt, and I'm a student in Indiana State University's Doctorate in Athletic Training program. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues from the Doctorate in Athletic Training program to discuss extreme ownership in athletic training, specifically with discipline and freedom. I'll give my colleagues a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with our discussion.
Hello, my name is Ethan Roberts. I am also a student in the Doctorate of Athletic Training program at ISU.
Hi, my name is Rachel Kirkpatrick, also a student in Indiana State's DAT.
My name is Emma Nye, also a second-year doc student here at ISU.
My name is Melissa Erickson. I'm also a Doctor of Athletic Training student at Indiana State.
I'm Carolyn Hampton, and I'm also a DAT student at Indiana State University.
All right, everybody's here. Everyone's ready to go. It's awesome. So in terms of discipline and freedom in athletic training, well, one of the key points that I kind of got from the reading, and we can kind of discuss some things that we all got out of it and how it applies to our own clinical practice. And I think it's kind of the connection between having the wherewithal to actually do something, even if you don't want to do it. And I think the biggest connection there for me was when the author said, well, there were SEALs who would have to get up really early in the morning, even if they didn't want to, because it was just what they had to do. And there were some of them who would go out and party and drink and do whatever and stay up until really late at night, or really early in the morning, rather, and then wake up a couple hours later, no matter what, because they had to, because they had the discipline to get it done. So in relationship to that in athletic training, it's kind of like you need to do stuff and do the things that you need to do, even if you don't want to do them, because they're going to save you time. And was the example that the author used. It was like, that if they wake up earlier, then they get time to do things throughout the day. So go to bed earlier, waste less time at night, and get things done during the day. And that made me think of our prevention class, where we're learning about more prevention techniques and how to apply them and how to document them. Applying prevention techniques in athletic training is going to save us time in the future by decreasing injury frequency, hopefully, if it's effective. And it also decreases the need of treating people because they're injured over time. And then that's what the majority of an athletic trainer's time is used for, is treating people. But if we can prevent those injuries from happening, then treatment rates would decrease as well. So what do you all think?
Yeah, Nico, I think that's a great example, especially it's something that we're all kind of going over this semester, especially with our prevention class, and taking that proactive step instead of being reactive, especially in our profession. That really, injury prevention is one of the staples of our profession that really sets us apart from other professions. I think another good example of how this relates to clinical practice is documentation. None of us really like to do documentation. However, it's something that we need to do. And it saves us time by, if we have to pass over care to other individuals, if we have good documentations, we don't have to sit there and explain every little bit to the other athletic trainer. So I think it saves time in that manner. And also, obviously, it saves our butts. This semester, there's been a couple instances where if I didn't have documentation, I could have been in real trouble, just because there's been some athletes in the past that, have come back saying, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. However, I had the documentation to back it up with. So that's something that kind of saved myself in the long run.
I agree. I think documentation is one of the biggest things that I really thought of, because it can be incredibly time consuming, and can be a really easy thing, I think, for us to say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it later. And so I've actually been starting to never leave work on a Friday unless all my documentation for the week is complete. And so I typically come in half hour to an hour early every day. And luckily, sometimes I don't have to do that, but I really think that coming in just that little bit early for me and committing that time to documentation has saved me time in the long run, so that I'm not, sitting down 2 weeks behind and spending hours upon hours trying to catch up. So that to me was my discipline, getting there a little bit early every single day, so that I'm not saving it all up for one period of time. Is something that I think has really saved me.
Yeah, Jamie, I agree. I think that segues into my example pretty well. I have been trying to set some time to make sure I have a really good trim plan going into the day rather than just showing up to work and winging it. Because there was a while there that I would show up to work and I would have patients and I didn't really have a specific plan for them. I would come up with a plan as I saw fit, which obviously was not effective. So now that I actually sit down and come up with specific things that I want them to do, I know exactly what the 30 minutes with the patient is going to look like. That saved me a lot of time in the long run as well.
I know it does take discipline to make sure that you give the time to do certain things, especially with documentation, because it seems like it's such a long process. And last year, I did not have discipline in documentation at all, and it was horrible. Don't recommend it. But there was a time that this year that I was very lucky that a patient interaction that I had last year didn't go any farther than it did because I would not have anything to support it. So kind of learning from my mistakes and everything that we do need to take the extra time to do certain things, and kind of like, I know in the chapters in the book, kind of prioritize what is important, and documentation should definitely be on top of the list, at least for me, since that incident.
I think what you guys are saying helps us to, because mine was kind of similar to Emma's too, kind of the pre-planning to rehab process and things like that instead of winging it. But I think quality care that we're talking about, as well as the quality documentation, and something this made me think about as well was I feel like every time like a patient comes in and I'll say, well, how are you doing today? Or how are you doing this week? Or something like that. They're always like, well, there's just not enough hours in the day for me to get things done. But I think some of that can be eliminated by kind of that pre-planning quality, or even the discipline to, okay, I know that these are my priorities today and I have to be disciplined enough to make that time to get those tasks done.
I think a big example or theme from this chapter as well was the leaders need to be prepared to follow. And that made me think of, next year when we have the opportunity to take all of these things that we learned in the DAT and bombard our new colleagues with information and new techniques. We need to remember to take a step back and allow them to bring in their experiences and maybe things that they learned in their doctorate or master's program. So I think that was a big eye opener for me. Like, I know that I'm lucky that I graduated from this program. I know that I know I have all of these techniques and approaches, and we just have to make sure that we're not overwhelming, and we remember that leaders need to be followers as well.
Similar with what you just said is I was thinking about when we have students that we're working with, specifically like taking that opportunity to be a follower with our students and let them start to take the lead, and maybe they'll come up with something that we hadn't thought of or we weren't focusing on that specific day, but kind of giving over those reins and showing by example what exactly we want, but then when they have the opportunity to kind of step up and be that leader, turn into the follower and let them kind of take over.
I think one of the key things with that is like being a good follower, even though you're like stuck to a set, like you should be following these specific rules, like being disciplined as someone who's following along and making sure that you're doing what you should be doing. That also gives you freedom to kind of ask more questions, be more available, find out those important things that, I mean, it's like the leader is always wrong and it's always the leader's fault, but the leader should have someone to turn to as well, even when they hit those roadblocks. So it's kind of like you have to, and this kind of goes to the end of chapter 12, where I felt like, okay, we're just going to drink lukewarm water and we're not going to be all of this, but we're going to be this, and we're not going to be all of this, but we're going to be this, you know? So in my opinion, that part of the chapter was kind of hilarious, because it was like, so you got to go all the way to being red, but don't be orange, you know, like be as much red as you can. I don't know. I'm trying to make an example and I can't, but it's like being courageous versus being stupid. Like there's like too much bravery makes you dumb. And it's like, well, you know, how much is too much? And I guess that's dependent on the clinician. But I don't know. In my opinion, that part of the chapter was not really beneficial. I don't know, just because it told me to drink lukewarm water and not pick hot or cold. But I guess there is colder water or warmer water, even though it's still lukewarm. I don't know. But what did you guys think in terms of applying freedom and making sure that you stay focused on the task without overextending your bounds?
I think that part of the book, it was trying to explain that the more you practice the discipline in whatever you're doing, that line between being kind of lukewarm and being on fire will become much more clear, and you'll get better at, deciphering that. So as you keep going, yes, it might feel like you might overstep and be a little too aggressive, or you might have moments where you're a little bit, soft or something. But then the more you practice that and keep working at it, you'll find that line of where exactly you want to be, and you'll be more prepared, and then it'll give you that freedom. So I think that was the point. But I totally see what you mean. So I think it just is focusing on the fact that you have to take the opportunity to practice that and work at it.
I think at the end of the chapter, very similar to Rachel, what I thought of it is that it's a delicate balance of what you need to act as a leader, and it's going to take time. They even said in the book that leadership is, it's a challenge. It will take a while for you to find your swing of things. But at the same time, if we're overly if we're too much of not taking other people's opinion or I don't have the list right in front of me, but if we're too much of that, that can be perceived as being a bad leader. But if we're too much of the other one, that can be perceived as us not doing anything at all. So I think I enjoyed the last part of the book of the difference between the two different words, because they were polar, they were opposites, but at the same time, it just made sense in my mind. It's like, hey, you can't be too much of this, but you can't be too much of that. You gotta find your way through practice and through trial and error to find that happy medium.
And I think a lot through self-reflection and getting feedback from the people that you're working with is something that's going to help you to make that figuring out process a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think the end of the book, the thing as a clinician and kind of going back to what Emma said, when we have all of this information that we're going to try to move to or give to other clinicians and the profession as a whole, I think the biggest thing I felt, you're applying all of those things. I think the word that comes to my mind is just staying humble. And I think that that's just something that I've had to work on my whole life. I think everybody should probably work on that their whole life. I think no matter what you're doing as a leader, if the people that are under you perceive you as humble, I think that is one of the biggest contributors to successful leadership, in my opinion. But that definitely goes back to, I think, what Emma was talking about earlier.
Just kind of as a side note, one thing that I kind of picked up during the reading was when it talked about discipline, the first thing that came to mind was structure. And if we think about the profession of athletic training is nothing structured in athletic training. So that's really difficult for me to kind of have a structured life where, you know, I could be waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, or I could not have anything going on until 1 o'clock. So for me, trying to find that happy medium and structuring my time in the way that it's going to work best for me at that point in time. So, you know, structured time or something that I might do 1 month or 1 day isn't going to be the same thing that I do the next day.
I think you make a good point, Ethan, and that's kind of where I guess, and Rachel kind of alluded to it too, but it's kind of where you have to make those decisions in order to stay within that boundary of being disciplined. So like being courageous or being on time, you know, without being, you know, too brave to be stupid, but then also being so meticulous that you run out of energy, you burn out. So it really is clinician dependent, especially when we apply these concepts into athletic training and how we can achieve like the best leadership principle that we can with our patients and with our students and with fellow clinicians, to be the best follower, but also the best leader, to take all responsibility without denying the patient from their own responsibility of self-care or the student's responsibility of self-learning. So it's kind of finding that fine line and it being clinician dependent. So.
One phrase.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Sorry. One phrase that stuck out to me, what I was going to say was to maximize your chance for success. So like the structure that may be successful for Ethan is different than what's successful for Nico, and what's different that might not work for me. But something else, and I can't remember, I didn't write it down, but I swear I read it at some point in this book, but I really don't know what chapter it was. Something about like having the structure, but also being able to adapt to that as well. So what may be successful for you one day may not be successful next week. So having that structure, but also being able to adapt to what we need.
Yeah, and kind of something that Nico kind of brought up about burnout. I think it's important not to run away with the idea of discipline means you have to work more, do more. I think it's working smarter, not harder. So I feel like if some athletic trainers were to read this chapter, they would think, oh, I need to be doing more. I need to be waking up more earlier. I need to be treating more patients. However, that's not really the whole theme of this. I think it is, you know, making time in your personal life. Like if you want something out of your personal life, you have to sacrifice something else. So that's kind of the big thing that I want other athletic trainers or other people in this profession to realize, that discipline necessarily isn't always, you know, you have to be doing more to be a better athletic trainer.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, what you're talking about, is just making better use of our time. I liked what you said about the schedules, how we need to be, I think with us, it's a balance. Instead of discipline and waking up earlier, it's a balance of being flexible, but don't be taken advantage of. So when coaches or somebody makes a different schedule, like, okay, I'm going to be there. But if you had something in your personal life that really means that much to you, maybe you don't go that day, or maybe you tell coach you need to wait, or you know what I mean? Like, so I think there's a really delicate balance in lives as athletic trainers, because we have no choice but to be flexible. But I think the biggest thing is not being taken advantage of in that aspect. So allowing yourself to have other priorities in life besides work is definitely a really important concept to discipline, in my opinion. But that being said, I actually have another meeting at 9 that's really important, so I'm going to go, but please finish the conversation. Bye.
I think this also relates to what we read in the other chapter in terms of applying time and assessing your situation and figuring out what needs to be done first. And I know with most of us, it's kind of like, okay, we're gonna, if you're doing an emergent situation or if you're doing an evaluation or diagnosis, it's kind of like, all right, we're gonna have a plan, arrive on the scene, provide the best plan of care in the right amount of time. And I think most of it is correct planning and setting out what you're going to do ahead of time, kind of like what Emma was talking about. If you're not clear on like 100% of what you're going to do with a patient because you evaluate and it could be like 4 different differentials, like what do you end up doing? You end up treating the symptoms and focus, and then once different symptoms dissipate, you reevaluate. So you can also apply that to life and athletic training. You know, if you don't know exactly where you're going to go in life, hello, job search, then you're going to have different options that you're going to go for. And then you're going to apply those into the best opportunity that you can. Figure out your symptom case, or like what you want most out of like your goals, or in case you're not thinking job, clinical practice, or what you want for your life in general, and how you can make those specific decisions to treat those areas of your life in order to get the most benefit out of it. And you can relate that to working with others or working with patients or family, anything really. Like figure out the parts that need to be treated or need to be fixed or need to be focused on with the majority of your time in order to maximize your time in other areas.
Yeah, and I think they describe that principle in the book as being calm but not necessarily being a robot. And I think that explains what your example pretty well.
Does anybody have any closing thoughts? If not, thanks for joining me and talking about discipline and freedom. And I look forward to talking with you guys again soon.